Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another Open Cluster Management Community meeting. Today we have lots to discuss. Um, it was heavily requested from the community. We have some integration between ManifestWork and placement, and Josh, as usual, came up with a solution to solve that, along with Ku Jing. That will be the first topic. And the second topic, Kun Hao will be discussing how we can further improve the open cluster management community. So without any further away, Josh, please take it away. Thank you.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, this is not working. Let me try to share my screen here. Firefox is just not playing along. There we go. All right. All right. Is the screen coming up, hopefully?
Not yet. Not yet.
I think it crashed everything. Interesting. Yeah, no, it definitely crashed. All right, but you can hear me, right?
Yep, we can hear you. It does say on Blue Jeans you're receiving Josh's screen, but I don't see it.
Yeah, no, I can't get actually two blue jeans, nor can I switch. I think crashed Windows. Interesting, but I can still talk. Maybe we can reverse them and I reboot, so I don't keep butting uh, like that. Mike, we reverse talk.
I think you're cutting quite a bit now. Um, Anyone else experience it, or is it just me? Is Josh cutting for you guys as well?
Yes, it's a little bit.
Did it come back, or is it still dead?
Okay, Queen Hal, you wanna go first while Josh? Oh,
Yeah,
I see your
I
screen.
was saying maybe we should reverse it because it still seems like it was having problems, but now it's sort of
No,
working.
it's good. It's good now.
Okay, you actually okay because yeah, I heard a lot of nice robotic sounds for a while there, so maybe it was just my internet. Anyways, okay, let me get going quickly then. So this is the design doc. Chojen posted it a while back. It's in our shared Google folder for the community, where Chojen went through and actually defined all of these. I have to admit, up front, I kind of went a little backwards here. I had a development Friday and I just got to working on it. And so I kind of finished at least a prototype of code and then came and talked to Chojen about it. But so we came up with it anyways, the document, because we wanted to share it with the community and get some feedback. And so I want to say initially it was just the very easy sort of first use case, which was the idea of how do we tie manifest work to a placement rule, and so whatever you match as part of your placement rule is a manifest work you could apply to a cluster. And so that was kind of the very simple one: is create a CRD that has something very similar to the manifest work spec, connect that to placement, and based on the placement result, put that manifest work spec on each of those clusters. So if you have one cluster or 2,000 clusters, you're able to push the manifest work there with just the single initial CRD and a single placement rule to go with it. But the community, and I think maybe Chochen had initially put some of these in, came up with two neat additions that I won't quite demonstrate here, but I will call sort of secondary and tertiary spikes that I think will be interesting to implement on top of the initial distribution of manifest work. And so that is a replica distribution. And the idea behind this is that if I set the replica distribution, for example, for 3, and my placement matches 3 clusters, and there's a deployment that has a replica of 3 in it, instead of just creating a deployment on each of those clusters with 3 pods in it, it splits the deployment to each of the 3 clusters with just one version of it. I think I put in one of the comments, and I have the comments hidden here. It was kind of borrowing from the KCP community has something like this. It's called Splitter. But again, it's the idea to take your deployment that would have otherwise been 3 pods that would have just deployed on the single cluster and break that up to across 3 separate clusters and deploy it as just one pod each. So that was one sort of neat addition that I'm definitely going to look at adding after the fact, especially if there's other folks in the community that are interested in that capability. And then the second one is sort of the fallback and reschedule. So if there's a problem with the placement, etc., can we do something about how we match that decision, how that's matched in the decision, whether it gets applied, etc., as well to the system. And so again, sort of another neat orchestration piece we can put on that's doing a little more than just sort of round robining through all my clusters and creating manifest work. There's a bit of a definition of what we might want it to look like. I'll have to admit, and you'll see this in the demo I do in a minute. I've strayed a little from the exact value or the exact version in here, but most of the pieces are captured because it's based very closely off of what Manifest Work has today as part of its spec. And but so the neat parts that are here that I don't have quite yet, but I definitely think I want to pick up is I have things like the clusters that it was applied to and the successful application or creation of each of sort of the children manifest works or the singular manifest works and some of the transition times. I don't quite have that yet, but after seeing it in the spec when we were doing the review, it's definitely something I'm interested in adding to it as well. And so over time. So just to recap, so Spike 1 was just to be able to create a CR with a placement rule and have that CR, which has the spec for a manifest work, be deployed to all the clusters in that placement decision. Number 2, spike story number 2 was to be able to do some fancy orchestration with deployments, etc., and be able to spread things like replicas across clusters versus just copying and pasting what's in a manifest work spec to the remote system. And then the third spike was around leveraging the fact that we can pick up some interesting data around a deployment, or if someone's got a pod defined or a replica set inside of a manifest work, and be able to change sort of how we provision or where these manifest works go based on the success criteria of that payload. And so the 2 additional spike stories are something we'll definitely look at and get to. But the primary spike story is what I already had a prototype for a while. And thank you, Mike, for pushing me to come and talk about it here. So if you haven't seen the link, and I'm assuming it's in the agenda, come and take a look at it and add comments. You don't see the comments here just because of the view mode I have it in, but there's definitely a bunch of comments in here already that got us to the place where we're at. So if you want to take a look at this now, this is the actual repo. It's in my private one, but I was going to, not private, sorry, it's public, but in my own repository for the moment. I was going to put some pull requests out tomorrow, actually, against the main repos, and so people can take a look at it there as well. Currently, though, I want to make a caveat here. It's in a single repo, and I was talking to Chojen about it, and he recommended that I was going to take the API out because that's how OCM is. So we put the CRD that you find generated out of the place manifest work. So we use the verb place and manifest work as the title for it. That'll go into the CRD will go into and the type will go into the API repo in Open Cluster Management. And then the place manifest work part, I think I'll make the pull request against work so that it can the controller can sit alongside and run within the existing work controller. And now that's up for negotiation, of course, but that was a suggestion I got from Chojen, which made sense to me, but it can also be run just like this, completely separate. And so the link to this repo is there, and if you want to follow through, you can try it out on your OCM deployments. I tried to put as much detail as I could. I'm not going to go through every line here, but I already talked about what I'm trying to solve with this. I have some details sort of about its security and how we're leveraging the fact that placement is connected to managed cluster sets, which allows you to gate access for this controller and these resources to specific clusters that have access to that cluster set. So that's kind of one of the key pieces. And then you can run this straight out on your laptop if you want against a kind endpoint or another Kubernetes install, as well as, for now at least, I published a public image of it as well that can be leveraged with a full deployment, or you can build your own if you want. And I put the steps here to do that. But so once you've built your own image, you can also deploy that out to the system. So I'll pause there for a second because I've covered a lot already. Any questions? Okay. So again, the key point here is to be able to define a equivalent to a ManifestWork, but that leverages a placement rule that under the covers is then going to create ManifestWorks for or in each of the clusters that I map to. All right, so we will flip over here. Let's go full screen and we'll run a demo. So again, just the link to the repo is there. You haven't checked it out. So I have 3 clusters here. They're named Sample, Sample 02, and Sample 03. I have the Open Cluster Management Hub deployed on Sample, which is what we see here running. I did it about 3 hours ago, so at the end of my workday, because I wanted to have an actual demonstration to go with it. You can also see I've got Sample 02 and 03 are my managed clusters that are joined to that hub system. Just because the proof's in the pudding. We're taking a look here at sample 02. We see the clusterlet is running and the work agent. This is the regular work agent. So everything here is just standard OCM IO that I deployed using the cluster ADM commands from the community website. And so you can see it's running on both the systems. So now I'm going to deploy the work placement CRD and the deployment. And so that's going in here now. And so you can see it created a bunch of things, but really under the covers, it's sort of the standard set. You've got the CRD that gets created. You've got the roles and the role bindings for leader election, as well as for the controller itself. You've got the deployment for the controller and a service account that's associated with it. And all of those, from a standard kube builder approach, are in the config, CRD, deployment, roles, etc., etc. And so now for security, I realized this as I was setting it up, is there's now the new default managed cluster set. So that saved me, you can see me smiling here, because it saved me having to create a cluster set YAML to start with. So I'm able to just do the get and show that here. So this is my default cluster set. It's not empty because the 2 clusters I have were automatically joined to it. And what I do need to do, though, is I am binding that cluster set, the default cluster set, to my namespace. So that's granting permission to the default namespace, to the default cluster set, which has my 2 clusters in it. And so I'm going to create a placement rule. The placement rule, to be honest, was already sitting there. So you'll see it just says, I think, oh, it did configure it a little bit. So that's a little bit of something. And so now we'll look at the decision for that placement rule. So this is the result of where, based on my placement parameters, which were empty, which in kube terms means everything. And so here we see I have a status on my placement decision. I have the actual decision list, and then I have my 2 clusters that came up in the placement decision as the target. And we can also see here, if we go under meta and name, it was all clusters was the name of the placement rule, and all clusters decision 1 is the name of the placement decision that got generated from that. And this is placement decision is a multi-page, just in case there are a lot of clusters. The implementation, if you go look through the code, is also designed to look up multiple placement decisions and go through all of the clusters that are in the multiple decisions. I'm going to pause for a second if there's any questions. Okay, so we've seen we have OCM Hub, we've got 2 managed clusters, we've got a cluster set which is granting permission to the default namespace to both of those clusters that are being managed, and we have a placement rule in that namespace that's using that cluster set that says, oh, I'm targeting all my clusters, which are sample 02 and sample 03. So now we're going to take a look on sample 02 and sample 03 for a config map in the default namespace. And here we see there are just the kubroot CA cert config map and this OpenShift service CA config map. There's no config map named sample on either of those because that's the kube spec I'm going to apply. So now we're going to create our place manifest work. So here you can see I've catted this YAML file so we can see what it looks like. It's very simple. This is a manifest work spec and workload and has the manifests. This is the exact same spec. Like this implementation actually references the manifest work spec. So it allows you to put the manifest, put the orphan control, as well as the configuration. Those are the three key parameters in a manifest work spec. So it leverages those. It will change with those over time, which is great. And it's anything you've written for manifest work will therefore work in this CRD as well. And then the one other new piece is the placement ref, which is pointing to my placement resource, which was called all clusters. And so if you remember what we were looking at above in this placement decision that you can see that's up here, is the name of the placement decision was all clusters -decision -01. What happens is that decision has a label on it, and that's the key you're supposed to use to find a placement decision. So the controller looks for the all clusters label on a placement decision and then is able to loop through this decision list to see which clusters it needs to target. All right, this was applying and hopefully it applied. So, oh, yes, we can see I used a watch, so it just sort of went multi-page instead of updating in place. But so at first we saw that the placement decision, it was verified and it was found. So the place manifest work CRD and the controller, it found the placement rule, it verified it was okay, and so this is just in the get status. It was processing it and it wasn't all applied. Then eventually it got to a state where it's as expected, so the manifest works are as expected and they are applied true. And if you look at the actual the conditions for it, then you would see a list of the actual payload, which in this case is a config map with a data set of foo, key equals foo, value equals bar. So now we're going to take a look on those systems we looked at before that didn't have a samples config map. We can see now we have one, and it's 1.5 minutes old, or almost 2 minutes at this point. That was on sample 2. This is on sample 3. Same thing, we have another one, or the config map was created there as well. Again, because my placement matched both of those clusters. We're going to look inside the config map, although I showed it up here where it's the data said foo and bar. Here you can see it says foo and bar. And don't worry, we're getting near the end. So now I'm going to edit the place manifest work. So this was the place manifest work, the new CRD that I introduced. We've got the data set here where we had foo. So I'm going to change it to be Josh. And I'm going to put was here. And remember, we looked at the config map just a minute before on that remote system, and we saw that it was foo and bar on that system. While I'm here, I'll mention. So here we see some of the stuff about the placement decisions and the manifest work being put on the remote system. So I'm going to save this. So again, I changed the config map in my place manifest work CRD. And we're going to go back out and look and see, okay, it says everything is still good, it's as expected, and it's applied. And so now we're going to look inside that config map on sample 02 again. And now we see that it's been changed automatically over to Josh was here. So my change on my place manifest work CRD was replicated out to all of my clusters. I mean, it's not instantaneous, but it's pretty damn fast. It happens as soon as the reconcile executes. Same thing goes the other direction as well. So if you delete the place manifest work, the new CR that we created, it will also get rid of the pieces unless you set the orphan. And so if in like normal manifest work, you set orphan equal to true, then the manifest work is cleaned up. The place manifest work, which is the new CR, gets cleaned up, but the resource that was put onto the remote system will remain. So there we see it was deleted. And we're going to take a look again on the endpoint. We see now we're back to just the original 2 config maps on sample 02, and on sample 03, the same thing. We have just the 2 config maps. Other things, so I obviously made a change to my CR that caused a change to happen to all of those manifest works. If the placement rule changes, so the placement rule decision grows or shrinks, then the manifest works that were applied will be grown or shrunk. So if it's a new cluster, it'll add a manifest work to the new cluster. If a cluster leaves the placement, then it will remove the manifest work from that cluster. So it will dynamically watches both the placement rule and the place manifest work. And last but not least is I wrote 5 minutes here, but it's actually 2 minutes at least by default. Is it also the controller will re-reconcile the place manifest work every 2 minutes. And what that means is if somebody goes out and changes the manifest work on one of these clusters that it was applied to, the manifest work, sorry, not a cluster, the namespace that the manifest work was created in, if someone makes a modification to it, this will set it back or reconcile it back to what it's supposed to be every 2 minutes. So there's a guaranteed reconcile loop that if somebody interferes or makes a modification, it's going to be reconciled back the way it's supposed to be. So that's it. I will go back here for a second to this, but first I'll pause. So questions?
Yeah, I think that's really promising. I think we should. The demo looks very great. Maybe I will work with you on maybe writing a proposal on the enhancement repo.
Okay.
Yeah, that's so.
Absolutely. Yep.
Hey, yeah, I got a question about the status sub-results, the status sub-results in the new API. In the status we can see the overall number of matched clusters, but how about what if the number of matched cluster doesn't change, but it's the membership clusters changed? How can we see that, or how can we reflect that fact in the status API?
When you say membership clusters, do you mean like the managed cluster set value changes?
No, I mean, for example, if we have 4 clusters in OCM, and at the first moment it's the placement decision match the cluster 1, 2, 3, and the next moment it's 1, 2, 4. So the clusters, the matched clusters from the placement decision doesn't change, but actually there is after that change, the manifest work for cluster 3 should be removed, and the new placement and the new manifest work will be added to cluster 4. How can we see that in the status?
I guess you wouldn't see it in the status. So all you would know is the end state, or there'd be a status today, at least the way it's written. There'd be a status condition that it's in the process of re-reconciling the manifest work. So what would happen in that case is, let's say we had 3 clusters. Okay, there were 4 clusters total, but 3 clusters matched whatever placement values I had in there initially. And so the controller will go through and read the decision and create a manifest work for each of those. The moment that the 4th cluster, let's say, gets a label that matches to that placement rule, and the 3rd cluster, we take that label off so it no longer matches that placement rule, the placement decision is going to get updated almost instantaneously. So because the placement controller has a watch on the managed cluster, which is where it's reading the label. So the moment I took the label off the 3rd cluster and the moment I put a label on the 4th cluster, I'll technically get 2 reconciles from the placement controller. And that will update the placement decision resource list. It'll go from the 3 clusters, which was 1, 2, and 3, to the 3 clusters 1, 2, and 4. And the placement manifest work controller that I just wrote has a watch on the placement decisions and will detect that there was a placement decision change and that placement decision is associated with a specific place manifest work CR, and it will re-reconcile that loop. So it will go through the placement decision and say, okay, my placement decision matches these three clusters, 1, 2, and 4. It's going to go through and say, okay, cluster 1 already has manifest work, we're good. Cluster 2 already has a manifest work, we're good. Cluster 4, which was, again, it's reading through the placement decision, it's going to say, oh, that doesn't have a manifest work yet, creates a manifest work. And then once it's gone through the decision list, it goes back and says, okay, of all the manifest works that are out there, which is now actually 1, 2, 3, and 4, is one of these no longer in the decision list? And it's going to say, yes, 3 is no longer in the decision list. Is that right? Yes, 3 is no longer in the decision list, so it will remove the manifest work from number 3. All that'll be in a single reconcile loop. And you can actually go through the code. It doesn't do it exactly the way I said it. I described it. We create a map and we check off as we're going through the decision tree which of the manifest work that exists sort of were found and which weren't, and then based on what's left, we delete the extras that are no longer part of the decision. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, and if the status if we can see the cluster changes, actual cluster changes in the status API, then we can easily know the so the changes can be caused by the failover of cluster number 3. So we can easily find that failover from the status API. From the perspective of workspace administrator, I don't know, but by design, whether a workspace administrator has the RBAC access to the actual managed cluster APIs. So, but
No, you're right though. We could definitely put some status pieces in there to sort of leave a breadcrumb trail of where we went so you'd have an idea of what happened, especially with that Spike Story 3, which is specifically around like when we detect failures and things had to be moved. In those cases, I think there's some room to put some details in there as you suggest.
Oh, thank you. We can discuss about that later. Um, yeah, that addresses my question. Thank you.
So these were just some issues I opened against myself for things I wanted to address sort of before it got committed. So one was to right now, if it's writing manifest works and there's a failure, it kind of stops. And I kind of wanted it to continue with the reconcile all the way through the loop and then throw the error at the end. So that was just one small one. I want to put a unique identifier for the generated manifest work. It'll be one unique identifier for that we'll create for the parent, which is the place manifest work object, and then we'll use that on each of the manifest works so that because I guess what maybe wasn't clear here is the namespace where I create the place manifest work is not required to be obviously the cluster's namespace. And so we're relying on cluster sets for access control, but it's possible that in my namespace, I create a manifest work called sample, and Mike creates a manifest or a place manifest work called sample in his namespace, and we target the same clusters. We don't want the manifest works to collide with each other. So I'm going to toss a unique identifier that's associated to the place manifest work CR on each of those remote manifest works I create so that they won't collide from a naming perspective. So that's a to-do as well. I said it was 2-minute reconcile. I'd love to make that configurable. I should have just done it when I when I wrote the original prototype code, but I didn't. So I'm going to add that in so you can adjust. It can be adjusted when you load the controller, whether it's 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 minute, etc. And the other one that I closed out was when I did the very original implementation. There wasn't a watch on the placement decision, so if placement changed, it wouldn't reconcile that change. I did that fix a couple weeks ago in my prototype, and so that's there now, so I closed it out. But so those were the sort of 3 main ones for that first spike that that I want, or sorry, 4 that I wanted to get in before I put the pull request out as well. Okay, I'll stop now.
Thank you, Josh. That was a great presentation. Are there any other additional questions? If not, Quinhao, we're on to the second topic regarding improving our OCM community. Quinhao, please take it away. Thank you.
Hello, let me share my screen. This topic is that we want to talk about how we can make OCM community have a better user experience. And I think we have previously talked about this once in this community meeting. And today I want to show some more feedback we collect so far. And if you open this link, you can spot. Here we have some users' feedback about the user experience and community improvement suggestions here. I would like to append this link to our chat, so you can feel free to append your. Oh, sorry, I can't find the chart. You may want to open this link and feel free to append your ideas here. And today I want to show some issues we collected so far. So basically we group these issues as 2 parts. One is that we collect some users' feedback about when they try to use and learn OCM, the issues they made. And another part is about the community improvement. And for the users, we divide them into 3 levels. The first kind of user is that this is the first time they know OCM and they want to quickly try OCM, right? The second level is that when they know OCM, they want to learn more features, and they may also have meet some issues. And then the third level is that then they want to develop with OCM. They also have some suggestions here. Let's go to them one by one. The first is when they want to quickly try OCM. The most feedback we collect is that when they want to quick start on OCM, they're curious about what is OCM, what can I do with OCM, and what's the difference with OCM and other similar projects, and how I can use OCM in a real user case. And one feedback is that when they go through the quick start, they find the end goal is not clear. Another feedback is that when they go through the documentation in our website, they may want to find more tutorials about OCM. And also, one feedback is that when they go through the API concept, they find that there are many API concepts, so it's not so easy to understand. Maybe we can improve this part. And also, this is a UX suggestion, is that if we can have a one-line command line for the beginner, it will improve their experience. Okay. Next is that the feedback when they learn OCM features. Most feedback is that they're curious about how we can use OCM. There are some usage issues, like they know OCM can dispatch jobs for multi-cluster environment. They are not clear about what it can do and how to do it. And a more general feedback is that if we can have some like a blog to show the detailed usage of our core functions, this will help improve their experience. And this is similar when they want to deploy an application on multi-cluster. They want an easy approach. Yeah. Another feedback is that, as you know, we have many components. So when they go through the features, they find it's hard to understand the relationship. They may want to know the features and functions, more details about it, and what's the relationship between these components or the features. And also, this is a UX feedback that I want to deploy Helm charts easily by specifying which cluster I want to deploy with a Helm chart. Okay, next is that when they want to develop with OCM, they found they want a API reference for the development. And also about the usage, this time they more curious about how we can integrate the OCM with the app or other middleware like Kubeflow. They want to know more about this. And also about the component relationship. If they want to develop with OCM, they also want to know how these components work with each other. And also we have many repos, so it's not so easy for them to know which repo is related to their requirement. So this too is still about the relationships, is not so clear for users. Last part is about the community improvement. These two are similar, is that, so currently our star is not so much and our community is not quite active. I think we can, we think we can think about this, how we can make our community more active, and if we can do something on this, like have one member at least per month or week to focus on the community upkeep. Next is that about how we can build a better community ecosystem. Like if I want to deploy, if myself deploy an OCM add-on, can I publish it to the OCM org? How we can let the users contribute more add-ons to OCM. And also, if I want to post a blog around OCM, how I can do it. And the third is about some experience for the communities of fresh new users. They want to know which components should I start, and any work group for different components or different aspects of OCM. And also, as a new developer who wants to contribute to OCM, is there any easy one for me to start with, so that we can attract more users to OCM to contribute their code? And the last feedback is about the documentation. We currently have the English version and the Chinese. But Chinese is feel hard to keep updating with the English version, so we can think about it. And also, the documents we have documented in our website, in each repo, and even in some other place. Do we have a way to group this doc in one place so that user can get what they know from a single place? That's all the feedback we collect so far. And on the right, there are some possible solutions. So today I want to share is that I want to know your feedback, if you have any more feedback on the issues we made. And then next step is that maybe we can think about the solutions and see which one is feasible, so we can start doing on this to improve the experience. I will stop here. Do you have any questions or feedback on these issues?
I think we collect a lot of different issues. I think we need to summarize some and maybe create some issues in the community. Some of them might be good for first contributions, or yeah, and I think most of them is about the document and maybe improvement of class ADMM. And Ming also has done a lot of work in this release to enhance the document and class ADM. So, but yeah, we probably should create some issues after summarize the issues here with some what's the common part, and create some issues.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe you have more ideas on this. I can append this link to our Slack channel, and you can later append your ideas if you have.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all for this topic.
I want to mention that do we have a plan to how we can implement some of these solutions? Are we planning to divide and conquer and just assign it to a bunch of members in the community, or we're gonna leave the issues up maybe as a good first issue for contributor? Qujang, what do you think?
I think it depends on the issue. Maybe some part is good for the first contributor. Some part some part needs, for example, the knowledge of how to develop the add-on. So that will need some members in the community to help to document that.
Okay. Are there any other comments regarding this topic? Thank you, Kun Hao, for that presentation. Please share the link and open a thread in our Kubernetes Slack regarding this. Thank you. I put in the chat if you haven't already requested a shirt, Open Cluster Management shirt, please go ahead and request one. But I got some feedback that some people are having an error. You have already redeemed this promo code, even though for sure they haven't. So if you got that error, please reach out to me, and then we can investigate what's going on with that. With that said, we have 2 minutes. Anyone have any topics that they want to bring up? Okay. Thank you everyone for coming to another Open Cluster Management Community meeting. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Right.